I've lived in Hollywood on and off since 1968, probably more times than anywhere else. I still keep coming back here. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain why someone falls in love with the place. It doesn't look like much, does it? And it isn't much in a way, but it's so much fun. Well, when I first got here back in 1968, it was at the height of drugs, and the Doors were playing right down the street, and Frank Zappa was playing up the street. There were people standing on the street selling acid. So it was a different place. It was a whole lot more fun. But now it's all poor people and the yuppies all hanging out together here.
Right now in this game, the Steelers are out in front by the score of 3-0. The officials are conferring right now.
Taxi driver in Los Angeles.
Back inside is 5.
They're trying to revitalize my city, Hollywood, and I don't know if they'll ever do a good job of it. It's still pretty cheesy. We're coming down to world-famous Sunset Boulevard, which doesn't look anything like Sunset Boulevard should. I live west of here, a ways, up in the Hollywood Hills, above all this. And it's a really beautiful house. I've lived there for 15 years, and it's home for me, and I don't want to move. I love it. But you go on locations, you learn to live any place. You live in a tent if you have to.
We'll see what happens in that challenge right now.
Dark Star was released in 1975. And after that, I thought that would propel my directing career, and I thought this limo was going to pull up and they'd ask Mr. Carpenter, we're ready to go to the set now for you to direct. And that didn't happen. And no one wanted me for anything. So essentially, I realized I have to write some screenplays. And I'm also required to make a living at this point. So I began to write, and actually, I did a pretty good job of it. So I sold a lot of screenplays. I sold a lot of ideas. Supported myself for several years. It's not a bad life.
Carpenter, c'est quelqu'un dont on reconnaît le cinéma en 2-3 plans. Et la plupart du temps, c'est ce sens de l'espace, cette manière de mettre du vide dans le cadre, cette manière de faire très peu d'amorces. C'est quand même exceptionnel, quoi. C'est-à-dire que pour moi, il y a cette épure, il y a cette espèce il n'y a même pas des signatures. C'est ça qui est extraordinaire chez Carpenter, c'est qu'il n'y a jamais un moment où on a l'impression que c'est du maniérisme, quoi. On a l'impression que ça sort vraiment de lui et que ce qui sépare l'idée qu'il a en tête de ce qu'il y a à l'image est quasiment nul. On ne sent pas un effort. On a l'impression que la langue du cinéma, il la parle avec un naturel, une facilité, une aisance. Je trouve ça sublime. Si on devait me demander pourquoi tu penses que Carpenter c'est un grand cinéaste, je répondrais à Saw. Je ne comprends pas ce que c'est ce film. Je ne comprends pas. Je n'arrive pas. Je n'arrive pas à comprendre d'où sort ce film. Je n'arrive même pas à imaginer que c'est pu sortir en salle. Tellement je trouve que c'est une œuvre vraiment radicale. Mais radicale au sens où peuvent l'être certains films de Bergman ou de Tarkovsky. C'est un film radical.
To me, John Carpenter is the closest of American directors to Orson Welles, creatively. Because the way I find he writes, like, his heroes are anti-heroes. You don't see a lot of blood, you know, because I consider Bishop an anti-hero. He's a scared man. And a hero, unless he's dumb, got to be scared. I mean, he's going to give up his life or something, possibly. And I think that's what he plays, you know. So he deals with the truth in that when he shows both sides of the character, not just the one side, not just that superhuman side. It shows the vulnerable side. All of that put together, there's a darkness to his film, which is what I like. And the darkness is what comes as a result of working with the character. Let the character do the story, not the special effects.
Assaut, on pourrait dire, ce qui est assez juste d'ailleurs, c'est un film qui est bizarre dans les années 70, parce qu'à une époque où on a des films qui justement sont extraordinairement critiques contre toute forme d'idéologie prête à porter, qui sont du côté de l'expérimentation, qui sont du côté du brouillage total des frontières entre les bons et les mauvais, tout le monde est dans l'entre-deux permanent, etc., etc. C'est un film qui tente à un moment donné de remettre en selle, finalement, de redorer le blason d'une forme de mythologie. Et donc, le policier noir et le détenu blanc sont des personnages qui vont retrouver une forme d'héroïsme, ce qui à l'époque n'est pas du tout à la mode. La figure du héros dans le cinéma américain des années 70, le film est fait en 76 quand même si on commence à être sur la queue de comète de l'âge d'or du cinéma américain, mais quand même, c'est un film qui paraît totalement anachronique, d'une certaine façon.
I tried years ago to get him to do a sequel to Assault. I had 2 treatments written. I wrote one, and a friend of mine was a writer, Courtney Joyner, wrote another one called Assault on Bel Air. And John liked both versions. He didn't want to do a sequel. And I respect that and I understand that. I think that is a special piece that should stay the way it is.
So the Assault from Precinct 13, that opened a few doors in America, but not really. That was in the London Film Festival that movie made a mark, and I started getting some reviews, and the reviews followed me back over to Los Angeles, and a producer I had met over in England, Mustafa Akkad, was financing films, real low-budget movies, and then Halloween came along. I suppose you find out what kind of impact the movie will have. As I drove by this particular set one day, and there's a tour bus going by. My God, they've added us to the tour. It's so strange. But I guess it beats working, like Mitchum says.
One evening, Irwin Yablans, who was the distributor of Assault on Precinct 13, called, and he had this idea to set the movie on Halloween night, and that kind of gave a lot of creative choices for us, because Halloween is one of the most exciting holidays for young kids in America. It's celebrated, you know, it's wild and crazy here. And so it had all these myths to it, and so we were able to go back to our youth and figure out what these myths were and write these scares. And I think that's how Halloween began, by writing a list of 10 scares, and then we incorporated the scares into the movie. John wanted to do a movie that had evil against good. I mean, real classic struggle. The character of Michael Myers was pure evil. It came out of just being a killer with no sense of morality. The mask was a William Shatner mask that Tommy Wallace, who was our production designer, bought on Hollywood Boulevard. What we did too is we cut the eye holes really large, and we wanted it to sort of have this kind of pasty, white, kind of scary, faceless sensibility to it. And then we did some stuff to the hair. Jamie Lee Curtis was a real find for us. She was very vulnerable, and she was only just turned 18, and she had a sensibility about her that I really liked a lot. I think it was that vulnerability that made her, as Laurie Strode, really, really work.
When we first got together, you know, it was the late 70s and the women's movement, and I was I wasn't militant, but I mean, I was certainly aware of the feminist movement, and I kept saying to him, you know, why are you writing these kinds of things? Why don't you write a film about, you know, social issues? I mean, we need to talk about abortion and this, that, social issues. And he was very clear that he didn't want to make people think, he wanted to make people feel. He wanted to elicit emotion in them. If it was the emotion that Halloween elicited, I saw it only once with him. I think his leg was black and blue by the time we were finished because I was so terrified. It was such a, I mean, I think it's brilliant. It's not something I'd ever want to sit through again if I didn't have to because it was so frightening to me.
Michael Myers incarne le mal et ne négocie pas avec ce mal-là. Le personnage de Carpenter lutte contre un mal à l'état pur. On est en 78. À cette époque-là, aux États-Unis, plus personne n'y croit. Il n'y a pas de mal à l'état pur. Il y a du mal quelque part, ça circule. Les gens sont à la fois du côté du mal et du côté du bien, etc. Carpenter, lui, non. C'est-à-dire qu'il a un côté, de ce point de vue-là, oui, anachronique, c'est-à-dire dépositaire de valeurs qui semblent complètement ringardes et dépassées dans le film des années 70. L'idée que non, il y a un mal à l'état pur. Et Donald Pleasence, c'est l'incarnation de Carpenter à ce moment-là, qui va tenter finalement de convaincre une communauté. Là, c'est la communauté d'Haddonfield, petite bourgade du film, mais pour Carpenter, ça peut être la communauté des spectateurs en général. Hein, c'est de convaincre cette communauté un peu léthargique, hein, qui prend tout au second degré, qui n'y croit pas, etc., à prendre très au sérieux la menace et l'idée qu'il y a un mal qui est là.
That was an important deal in those days. That's what started my career and my opportunities in Hollywood, because you have to make money for the producers and the studios. If you don't make money, they don't need you, or unless you bring a certain amount of class, and that definitely is not me. By the Kentucky Fried Chicken store is the main Halloween street. I've driven by this place a couple of times, but I haven't really gotten out and looked around since 1978. This is a kind of a non-parking situation, but if we pull over here, I think we can see some of the places I shot this movie. Shall we get out? And just as I'm talking to you here, there's a little van right behind me that's doing a tour. We're on the Halloween street here. We come over this way. This was the main house in the film right here. We shot on the upstairs and the downstairs, all the views looking out. It's changed a bit. They've kind of spruced it up. It looks like they've made some changes so the commercials can be shot here. Now, if we walk this way just a bit, about the center of the door, if we turn our look across the street over there, that's the house across the street, the one with the 3 pillars and the little American flag. That's where the rest of the action essentially took place, is here and here, moving across the street. And it was the extraordinary lighting job of Dean Cundy that made this place look so incredible. Hasn't changed that much in all these years. Well, Donald was an actor that I truly loved and really wanted to work with. I admired his work throughout his career. And I was a little scared of him. But we became fast friends on Halloween, and we made other films together. He became a dear, dear friend of mine. And he was a wonderful human being. I don't think he ever got the recognition that is due him from, I don't know, the world at large. Perhaps he did. I never felt it. He was rated as that good an actor, but he was a fabulous actor and a close friend. I miss him very much. I still miss him. Huh. Well, let's move on a little bit, huh?
Dreamin', dreamin', dreamin' you'll look my way. Dreamin', schemin', hoping that you'll be mine someday. Dreamin', dreamin', dreamin' of come what may. Dreamin', dreamin', hoping you'll be mine someday. Hoping you'll be mine someday.
And this is the beautiful, incredible Los Angeles Theater, downtown LA. They don't make them like this anymore. I used the lobby for a sequence in Escape from LA. I first came here August or September of '68. I saw my first movie in Los Angeles in this theater. I suppose that most of my education in terms of learning how to make movies was begun in a theater like this, where you fall in love. You have to be passionate about filmmaking. You have to have a lot of passion and love for cinema. And I found mine in places like this. Well, I'll go back to when I fell in love with movies was back in the, from the early 50s onwards. My parents would take me to movies. My mother especially was somebody who loved films. And I guess I was around for the transition from the old days of going out to movies and cinema houses like this to multiplexes to the way it is today. It's changed a great deal. But my love was formed in the 50s primarily through westerns and science fiction and horror films. Those are my main influences, the movies I love the best. But I saw everything that came out. And it was a love affair from early on. I came out here to Los Angeles in 1968, and as part of my education at USC, we began to watch everything. Movies I had not seen, movies I had seen. Some of the earlier work of directors. We watched the work of Howard Hawks and John Ford and Alfred Hitchcock and all the Western directors, the science fiction directors, the Europeans, and it was quite an education.
It's most likely the #1 film school in the world. I taught there for 51 years. We encouraged the students to test the waters in different directions. You know, we would push them out right at the beginning. We didn't tell them how to do anything. We didn't say this is the way you make a movie or anything else. That was a process of discovery because they all came with a desire to do that. Now, there were a few people who had played around making some films with home movies on their own. Very interestingly, a number of those people had attained a certain level before they came to the school and stayed right there with all their other films. That certainly wasn't true of John. He did move farther and he grew in the process. He always was willing to bite off a little more than he could chew, which is the way you learn. You learn from the mistakes. He understood, or at least picked up very quickly, some of the concepts of editorial relationships. And so he was able to do that right on at the beginning, whereas a lot of students have trouble.
USC was a school that emphasized Hollywood filmmaking as opposed to experimental. USC had always had ties with the Hollywood movie business, and most of us were interested in that kind of career. I always wanted to make westerns when I got into the business. I love westerns. But by the time I got into film school and I worked my way into the movie business, westerns had died out. They were very rare. We used to debate Hawks and Ford in film school. John Ford was an immigrant. He was an Irish director. And his movies were incredibly sentimental. and his portrayal of male-female relationships were so idealized. And Ford worshipped the military, everything military. And so his movies really date now. And they dated badly during the Vietnam War. And he's made some great films. Some of them I just cannot tolerate anymore. I just think he was so overrated as a director in terms of being a poet. Howard Hawks, on the other hand, was Midwestern America. And he had a very different sensibility towards his movies. He was much more cynical and dark, which I immediately was attracted to. All this cruelty going on in Hawks' world is incredibly funny. And it's the humor in his movies that is so surprising. And his Westerns are really unsentimental. So I find his movies more modern, much more modern than John Ford. And John Ford was from another era, almost a Victorian era. Howard Hawks was truly a part of this country, American cinema, and the 20th century. Well, Peckinpah is a strange character. Wild Bunch was about Vietnam, end of the gunfighter era, and it truly was transforming of American cinema, but in a totally different direction. He never really made a Western before or after that got near it. That's a very controversial film, and still is in some quarters. It's so violent. But the even more controversial movie is Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman. That's an amazing film, way underrated movie. I love that film. I taught a course in Santa Barbara a few years ago, Sex and Violence in the Cinema, to a big class of kids, college kids. There are only two movies that deeply upset the students in this class. In the Realm of the Senses, a Japanese film, which has a lot of overt sexuality, and Straw Dogs. After Straw Dogs, the audience reaction was unbelievable, these kids. Afterwards, outside the screening room, there were groups of students who wanted to talk about it and were so upset and twisted around by the rape scene. They didn't know what to make of it. But especially my female students were very disturbed by this rape scene, wanted to talk it out so they felt a little bit better. And the reaction of the entire audience to the siege in the end of Straw Dogs was unlike anything I've heard today. Screams and groans and oh my gods, and it just shows you Peckinpah's power. A lot of the stars died of smoking. I worked with Charlton Heston. Romanians, you're talking about gypsies. He's going out with beautiful. I was terrible. He's a movie star. I thought it was awful. Famous world talent. I don't know. Carlo, the teenagers went by, and there's this kid in the back seat, which is where all the porn stars. I'm going to drive a minute here and not talk so much, so I save our lives. We seem to be doing okay. I ended up loving Paris. Is your seatbelt on, young man? Yeah, this is where you got to put it on, because if we have a problem here, this is going to be really tough. I traveled to Paris. I fell in love with Paris actually later in my life than earlier, and since '97, since Vampires, I've really come to love it. And it's an extraordinary city. I had such a wonderful time there. I went to Avoyas and with the fog, personally I went there, and it was amazing. I got to meet one of my heroes. I got to meet Roman Polanski. And it was strange though. The politics, I wasn't aware of the politics going on behind the scenes. And boy, a lot of these guys take it a little too seriously. One of the judges at the time was Claude Lelouch, who, I don't know whether he was the president of the jury or he was on the the panel, and I just wanted to come up and say hi, and I admired a couple of his films, especially Happy Anniversary and a couple others. As I approached him and said, "Hello, my name is John Carpenter, and I just wanted to tell you, you know, what it means to me to meet you," and he was really offended that I would dare come up and speak to him as if I was trying to influence his vote. I could give a shit about the vote. It was my chance to meet you know, a legendary director, and I thought, what is his problem? I don't care if he votes for The Fog. I wouldn't vote for it myself. I just wanted to give him a compliment. So it was bizarre. And later on, I was the president of the jury, and the Avoyats became another festival, kind of a science fiction and horror festival. I was the president of the jury that time, and I got to see behind the scenes. My God, everybody's taking this way too seriously, arguing about these movies. One director was out, "That's pornography." And I, well, Lord, relax. You guys need drugs.
En France, on a souvent tendance à considérer, finalement, qu'un bon cinéaste américain est un cinéaste anti-américain. C'est notre espèce de fantasme du cinéaste critique de gauche. Hein. Donc on a toujours fait, par exemple, comment la critique, lorsqu'elle redécouvre et qu'elle adoube Carpenter à la fin des années 90, la critique majoritaire, parce que certains ont déjà fait le travail avant, pour que Carpenter passe comme étant un grand cinéaste, on va moins chercher ses qualités de cinéaste, comment il cadre, comment il met en espace, quelle importance il accorde au regard, qu'on va essayer de trouver une espèce d'alibi politique. Hein, c'est un cinéaste contestataire, critique, cinéaste de gauche, donc c'est un bon cinéaste. Hein, la critique en France aime bien les cinéastes américains quand elle les imagine ou quand elle les fantasme, finalement anti-américains. Ce qui est une erreur gigantesque, parce que Carpenter est vraiment, mais comme tous les autres. Hein, on pourrait citer Romero, on pourrait citer Craven, on pourrait en citer beaucoup d'autres. Carpenter est un cinéaste qui est profondément américain.
Bah, le truc du cinéaste politique, je trouve que c'est un peu une super tarte à la crème, en général. Ça a été dit récemment, je crois, de Romero. C'est une tarte à la crème de dire ça. C'est pas vrai. On peut pas dire d'un cinéaste qu'il est politique. Parce que, finalement, c'est quoi le politique? C'est la vie de la cité. Hein, au sens philosophique du terme, hein, quand on prend les racines philosophiques, bon, c'est ça le politique. La politique, c'est la vie de la cité. Si on est cinéaste ou si on est artiste et qu'on s'intéresse pas à la vie de la cité, bah on n'est pas artiste, qu'on n'est rien, quoi. On n'est pas cinéaste, on n'est rien du tout. On fait autre chose. On fait du journalisme à la limite, ou bien on exerce son rapport au monde d'une autre manière. Évidemment qu'il est politique, mais comme tous les cinéastes, tous les vrais cinéastes sont politiques. Pour moi, dire qu'un cinéaste est politique, c'est un pléonasme, ça veut rien dire.
Le film, à mon avis, clé de sa reconnaissance, en tout cas en Europe, c'est L'Ordre de la Folie. À mon avis, il y a 2-3 raisons à ça, et je pense que la principale, elle est du côté de la critique. C'est que la critique adore les films qui réfléchissent sur eux-mêmes, hein, et singulièrement en Europe. En Europe, on adore la critique lorsque le cinéma qui se prend pour objet, voilà, qui prend l'image pour objet, le statut de l'image pour objet.
When I was aware of perhaps a change was after a movie called In the Mouth of Madness. And I can't explain why, but all of a sudden it occurred to me from the reviews that I was reading and some of the interviews I was doing, boy, they're taking this pretty seriously. Damn. I think it's extremely flattering, but movies is not an intellectual art form. It's emotional. So it doesn't have anything to do with making the movies. It's fun to read about it, but look, I've gotten so many negative reviews in my career. I'll take the positive, even if they're intellectual. I'll even take bad intellectual reviews. I don't care. I'm not proud. So I'm sure you have traffic like this in France. Is that correct? Everywhere we go, we hit traffic. You learn to love it. We have a strange view over here of France. I think you're probably aware of over this war that has been going on. A lot of hostility America has towards France. Which it's just astonishing to me. I don't quite understand it. But one of the things that a lot of the critics of the French, and it's mainly right-wing critics in this country, say is that, well, you know, the French, what are they? They like Jerry Lewis and Woody Allen. And it's just, you know, America's an anti-intellectual place. It always has been. It always will be. We're a bunch of scallywags over here. We're a bunch of people who ran away from Europe. And we wanted our own religious freedom, and we wanted to make money, and we're really a bunch of bandits. You know, we came in and took over. And we don't trust them smart people, you know, pointy heads. Don't like them. The intellectuals over there. And if you think too much, it's not good for you. Oh, we're so full of shit. I can't believe it.
Escape from New York, the high adventure of the future. One man must go in where no man has ever gotten out. And if he comes back alone, his nightmare has just begun.
Who are you?
John Carpenter's Escape from New York.
Heard you were dead.
This stuff is like gold around here, you know.
Hold on.
Kurt is a great actor. And John is a great director. And you put the two of them together and they enjoy working together. There's no bullshit. You know, there's no politics, there's no Hollywood, there's just making the movie. What works for the film? And they hit it off immediately because Kurt can play Elvis and he can play Snake Plissken. You know, he can play a used car salesman like you've never seen. And John really appreciated that in Kurt, and Kurt gave him no grief. Kurt understood the character as he did the Elvis character, and John really appreciated that, and because John had to work less with Kurt probably than anybody's ever worked with, because Kurt was all over it.
On Escape from New York, Charles Bronson read the script and liked it and wanted to play the lead, but I had committed to Kurt Russell at the time. And I had worked with Kurt in Elvis. And we had a great time, and I felt he had a real talent, an unusual talent. He was a Disney child star actor. And he played Elvis Presley with a lot of charisma and a lot of ability. And so he wanted to be an action hero. He wanted to be mean and down and dirty. The movie was pretty dark and nihilistic for its time, I have to admit. That was a dangerous character. Basically unique for its time, an American character, which is, I don't care about you. I don't care if you live or die. I don't care if you win or lose. I just want to move on. So just don't get in my way. The movie did very well. I was very happy with what happened to it. And it established me in Hollywood as a director.
I guess maybe the first thing that I think about Escape, his wit is there, you know. In those films, at least, he kept a really happy set, or a comfortable set. John's not a screamer. He's not, you know, nasty. He doesn't use bad language. He's very witty. He's relaxed, in my experience of him. John put the movie together and screened it And there was question in the audience mind whether Maggie survived. So he said, I need one more shot. I've got to have a shot of you dead. Well, by that time, you know, we were long gone from St. Louis and anything else. We resurrected the costume. We went down to our garage. By this time, we had been married for a year or two. And we went down to our garage and took the cars out, laid me down on the cement, put some blood in my hair, and he got his close-up. So that was shot in Studio City in our front yard.
He's always had that openness in working with his people in his movie. He creates his family. And they share information, you know. No one guy can make a movie. I mean, you need a lot of input from a lot of people. John, you ask him a question, he answers questions. That's what he does all day long, answers questions. You know, people come up to him. Do you like this color for her dress? And he'll say, you know, yes or no. Or if he doesn't know the answer, he'll say, well, what do you think is best? And they'll say, well, I think the blue helps her eyes and blah, blah. He says, let's go with the blue. You know, he involves you in the process of filmmaking. So it's not, even though it's called a John Carpenter movie, it's John Carpenter's family, you know, that he creates and makes it a safe place to create, which is one of the few last domains in Hollywood. I mean, when I first started out, guys like Howard Hawks and Orson Welles and John Huston, these guys made their own movies, you know. Today, there's very few that make their own movies. Maybe a Walter Hill, a John Carpenter, I'm sure a Steven Spielberg. You know, there's very few that create that family that they make their own, you know.
Action! Well, if you take a basic horror film that's made by anybody, at its essence, horror is about kind of moral anarchy. It's about evil that sprouts up in the middle of usually normalcy, although not always. And the savagery of horror can be played around with as a theme, even by someone who's unaware of it. It has enormous potential as cinema.
We are rolling. Fire in the hole. Speed. Marker. Set. Action.
Here we go.
Quiet time.
Got it? Yes. Beauty.
I want to do this ghost point of view. So I'm going to need some people to be coming and get hit. I'm going to need to lay a whole raft of bodies, and I'm just going to come in through and drive right at them and try to get to them at the last possible second. All right? So let's set all that up and we'll do a rehearsal. Okay.
Horror and science fiction both. This is where you can really do something with cinema. You can make people believe in ridiculous things like werewolves and vampires. It's where cinema's magic comes into play. I like films about the evil that's exterior from the outside, which is a lot easier to deal with and more pleasing to the audience, I think, than when you say the evil is really within our own hearts.
We're rolling. We are rolling.
Give me your marker.
Quiet, please.
More smoke, more smoke, more smoke.
Smoke. Come on, smoke in. Let's go. Smoke. In here. Smoke it. Action.
I think John wants to make movies. He doesn't want to send a message to anybody, I don't believe. John wants to make movies. He loves making movies. He grew up watching movies. He's just a movie man, and he just loves it. And I don't, you know, I could be dead wrong. I've known him for a long time. But I'm pretty confident in saying that he just wants to make a good movie for himself, not necessarily for the masses.
Certainly the atmosphere in Christine, the whole atmosphere on the set was, the word I always think was playful. It felt like a very playful set. John played practical jokes a lot. And that was something that I loved because, again, it kept people very relaxed. Because if the director is relaxed enough to take 5 minutes and hide the microphone and make, you know, the sound person go crazy, then that tells everybody, okay, this is something we're doing to enjoy it. Because it was clear he wanted something a little bit bigger than life, a little bit satirical, a little bit funny, but still scary. But, you know, I think at one point early on he said, it's a movie about a killer car. If we take ourselves too seriously, the audience won't take us seriously at all.
I have a little bit more fondness for it now, but parts of it are better than I remember it. I still don't think it's very scary. And that was my fault. I could have done a better job. But the performances and a lot of the, I don't know, the feel of the film are pretty good now these days. I'm not unhappy with it. But at the time, I thought I was getting tired of doing that kind of film. I'd come off of The Thing, which was not a particularly big hit. I was a little bit worried about my career. So it came along, and I just wasn't into it. I'd love to have done something else. But luckily, as I look back on it now and I watch it again, it's really not bad.
I think John enjoyed the character part of the film. I think he liked doing some more character stuff than he'd done. I mean, I think he was really into the mom character and the family, and he seemed to have a lot of fun doing those scenes, because I don't think he'd done a lot up to that point. I mean, most of his films, the characters, you learn about them in the action. And this film that had more traditional character development scenes. It had more scenes that were really just there to let you know about the character. They really didn't serve a lot of other functions. And I had the feeling that was fun for him. And that was where we did the most kind of playing with the acting. Like the scenes with the parents, that was where he was most like, oh, try it if you get even angrier. Oh, now try it where you really, you know, don't show them that you're really angry. And he seemed to really enjoy getting to play with that sort of detail, which maybe he hadn't done so much of before. It's clearly the case that, yes, this was an anomaly. Christine was an anomaly in John's career, at least up to that point, certainly. Most of John's films have such a specific kind of dark humor. They have a specific kind of political consciousness. They have a specific cynicism, none of which really are part of Christine so much. Christine is really more almost an old-fashioned horror ride. And in that sense, yeah, it is more maybe Stephen King's take on the universe than John Carpenter's take on the universe. I mean, I think John brought humor to it. I mean, the book of Christine is certainly much more self-serious than the film. I mean, the book of Christine is like, this is a serious tale. The film has a sense of humor about itself, but so many of John's films that I think of as expressing him, who he is, they're horror films, but they're horror films that go to much bigger places.
Mayday. Mayday. Anyone hear me? Oh. This is U.S. Station 31. You read me? Found something in the ice. We need some help down here. Can anybody hear me? We found something. We found something. We found something.
très fort avec John Carpenter, c'est que quand il y a une image qu'on reçoit comme spectateur qui est absolument indéchiffrable, c'est que quelque chose ne va pas. Et un hélicoptère avec 4 mecs qui veulent tirer sur un chien, c'est par essence une image qui est absolument indéchiffrable. C'est-à-dire que quand le film commence et qu'on est face à ça, on sait qu'on rentre dans un monde où il n'y aura plus aucune règle.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's one.
You guys gonna listen to Gary? He can be one of those things!
Là où il est très fort, sachant que le spectateur sait qu'il peut nous en mettre plein la vue, il peut nous faire peur avec rien. Donc du coup, 2 fils électriques dans un petit bol où il y a du sang, c'est encore plus effrayant, ça fait encore plus peur que tout le déploiement de chair, de monstres qu'on a vu jusqu'à cette scène-là. C'est ça un grand cinéaste. C'est quelqu'un à un moment qui sait qu'il faut retourner à l'économie de ce qu'est le cinéma, même quand on n'a pas de limite économique pour faire ce qu'on veut. C'est-à-dire que c'est un des films, je pense, où il a eu le plus d'argent pour faire ce qu'il voulait, mais il décide, dans des moments très précis, de tourner et de réaliser les scènes comme s'il n'avait pas un sou, parce qu'il croit au cinéma. Il croit au moment où le cinéma peut nous effrayer, nous inquiéter sur des choses qui sont très simples.
At the time, I wanted to kill Rob Bottin. I just wanted to throttle him because he was young and he was creatively a genius, but he just could not get from A to B. And he had hired people that couldn't help him get from A to B. The organization of what Rob was doing was completely amok, but the work was fantastic. And those guys were working round the clock all the time. The splitting of the head, oh man. I mean, the first time we did that, it was just atrocious. And then it was like 6 hours to do it again. And we were up against the wall. And, you know, it was that. It was excruciating stuff. And, you know, I really seriously just want to take Rob by the throat and say, you know what, wake up, Al.
Childs et Macready, dans un des innombrables corridors de la base arctique, se retrouvent tous les deux seuls. Il y a un doute sur qui est la chose. Est-ce que c'est Childs ou est-ce que c'est Macready? Et là, il y a eu beaucoup de spéculations d'ailleurs sur l'identité. Est-ce que c'est l'un ou l'autre, ou ni l'un ni l'autre? Évidemment, c'est l'un des deux. Et Carpenter disait, il suffit de regarder la laine. L'un des deux personnages, finalement, il fait très très froid évidemment, lorsqu'il parle, donc lorsqu'il respire, son haleine ne se condense pas. Et lui, c'est la chose. Il suffit de regarder, on voit qui est la chose.
We were on vacation when The Thing was about to be released and E.T. was about to be released. We got back to the States and there was the cover of Time magazine, or one of the big magazines in the States, with Spielberg on the cover, or with E.T. on the cover, I can't remember. And I remember John saying, that's what the country wants right now. They want sweetness and light, and The Thing is not going to be accepted. And I think had The Thing preceded Alien, or come right on the heels of Alien, it would have been a huge hit, if for no other reason than the special effects, which is where he really put his emphasis and accomplished, you know, it was incredible. But by the time it did come out, the nation wanted E.T.
Il faut se souvenir des critiques de The Thing à l'époque, notamment américaines, qui assassinent littéralement le film. Mais vraiment. En plus, il y a la question du sida qui va bientôt arriver. Donc on trouve que le film est extrêmement douteux sur cette question de la contamination, qui est pourtant une figure mère du cinéma de Carpenter, la question de la contamination, justement, hein, qui est même le mode opératoire central du mal. Hein. C'est moins de bouffer l'autre que de le convertir. Hein. Et donc cette expérience, elle est dramatique. Et pendant des années, Carpenter va mettre des années à s'en remettre.
I've always felt that some of the reviews that he got, and that film in particular, were some of the worst reviews I've ever, not in terms of how mean they were, I mean, like out of sync with what the movie was. I felt like that was a film where, for whatever reason, people decided they had a point of view about that film before they ever saw it. It's sort of like what happened with Heaven's Gate, you know, where before anyone had seen that film, everyone knew it was a terrible movie. And I felt like that's what happened with The Thing. I remember that vibe where it just, somebody decided it was bad, and then that became the thing that everybody decided, and then when they saw it, I felt like every critic who wrote about that film sat in the movie waiting to have, looking for evidence to prove the case that they already thought.
We were prepping another movie called Firestarter that eventually got made, and they pulled the plug on that movie. And that's when John really, you know, that's what really hurt more than anything, was the fact that they had pulled the plug on Firestarter, which was a really great movie that we were going to do that, like I said, eventually got made. I think it was Dino De Laurentiis that did it or whatever. It was the first time that he had to really deal with the politics of the studio. That was the very beginning of something that was to drive him out of making those kinds of movies.
We're passing Universal Studios where I made The Thing. It's over that hill. Everything is over the hill here. Even I'm over the hill. This is the front door of the legendary Cherokee Studios. How's it going? What's going on here, guys?
Howdy.
Hi, can we walk through?
Sure.
What you guys doing?
Just going around, setting up for a session. How's it going?
Here we are. The scene of the crime where it all happens. Recording and mixing. Nice and air conditioned. I think I'll sit down over here. I grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. My father was a musician. He was a music teacher. And he taught me the violin, but I also learned the piano, and I picked up guitar. I played in a rock and roll band when I was in high school and college. And I love music. I wrote a lot of music and thought about it a lot. Thought about a career in music, but my first love was film, was movies.
So that theme, the bam, ba-da-dam, that's John's theme. He brought that in from his imagination, and it's nothing that he worked hard on. I mean, obviously he's got his genius that he created it, but he didn't have to labor over it. Like he walked in, he just said, here, bum, da-da-da, fooled with a couple notes, just kind of working on one area. Once he had it down, he just played it, and that was it. So most of our film scores were pretty much improvised.
My inspiration in terms of film scores was not so much of anyone who played electronic music, but was from classical compositions. Bernard Herrmann was a big influence on me, and mainly because he created such effective scores by using such simple instrumentation. Sometimes just a few strings, as in Psycho. Sometimes a big orchestra. But his music was so powerful. So I would go on a synthesizer and imitate orchestral sounds, and always thinking of Bernard Herrmann.
John was more sparse. He was into the minimalism. I mean, you know, first time he played a cue and he held a note, one note through the whole cue, I'm going, huh? But then when he started putting layers on top of it, and I saw where he was going with these things, they became soundscapes, sound textures. And they worked for his movies. Remember, this was custom music for the movies he had and the ideas that he was trying to communicate. So the idea was the score should always reinforce the scene. The score shouldn't come forward and have you pay attention to the music. If it does that, it's not done well.
When I'm directing a movie, I never think of music. I always have music going in my head almost every day, whether it's something I've heard on the radio or something of my own that I'm humming. But directing, getting a film shot, is such a fragmented process that I'm really not thinking of a musical score. And then after the movie is cut and edited so that I've got it in the form that I like, then I'll go and concentrate only on music. The idea of scoring, along with directing and sometimes writing, gives me this voice, gives me an ability to add another creative element, making it more mine.
I have to say, the whole time from we started 1980, 81, and up through They Live, which was about 88, 89, for myself, that was one of the greatest times of my life. John told me that he enjoyed scoring the music almost as the most fun he would have on a movie. Because, you know, there's a lot of work writing it, producing it, shooting it, editing it, and now you're at the end. The baby is almost born. And for him, he could turn off the phone and come over to the studio and be the musician, composer for his own movie. And to him, it was like a vacation from all the stress and all the other stuff that goes on with making a movie. He could now just relax. And he just had a lot of fun. It was just, like I said, it was just one of the greatest experiences for us to work together and make those film scores. And they hold up. You know, and no, we weren't John Williams, and we weren't Jerry Goldsmith, and we weren't James Horner, and we weren't dealing with big orchestras. This was a couple guys in a studio making art.
You know, it's interesting. I have different feelings about film scores. I have a little duality here, because part of me loves definitive musical scores that are completely unique and strong and forward, like the theme from Star Wars, for instance, the John Williams. It's a part of the film, it's part of lore. So the opening of North by Northwest, Psycho. These scores are just a part of movie history. On the other hand, there's some scores that disappear. I call them carpet scores. They just lay a little carpet under a scene. And they support the image and they support the drama. And I'm much more in that category, invisible scoring. And it's harder to do. One of my scores, Halloween, became kind of famous just because it has an unusual little riff to it. But for the most part, I'm a carpet layer. I'll carpet your apartment so that you walk around and you don't even notice it. I get along with Kurt, who is, you know, extreme right. He's so far right, you wouldn't believe it. He's like Attila the Hun, right? But it's the work we meet, and our brothers. We're both the same kind of professionals.
Kurt took a big rap for that movie too, because a lot of people misunderstood that. But if you see it again, you understand what that was all about. It was a big spoof. It was a big joke. It was supposed to be fun, and a lot of people took it way too seriously. We were just getting ready to go into the dub, and we were showing the picture to the studio for the first time, and we just had a really horrible experience about that. What happened was one of the main players at the studio had gotten up to go to the bathroom, came back, and had missed one of the most important parts of the story that was explaining some things. So at the end of it, after a couple of days, came these notes about, okay, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, and blah, 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 blah. Well, almost all of the notes were specific to the fact that he didn't understand who the girl was, or whatever it was. I can't remember what it was. But it was one of those things that was devastating to John, the fact that somebody could actually walk out and then come back and have the balls to comment on some things that he didn't really understand or know. It just hit John completely the wrong way, and it was time for him to say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. This is bullshit, and I don't care how much money they've got, I don't care how much money they give me, and I don't give a shit about any of that.
If you're running your ship and something goes wrong, to fix it, you want to be able to say, Bill, put a cork in that hole there before we go down. I think on Big Trouble in Little China, he didn't know who Bill was. There were 30 guys out there, and a big studio picture. There were a lot of people, he didn't know who they were. It's a business, so you want to make money, but at the same time, you want to be able to do the stuff you like to do. And when they don't let you do that, when they come in and say, no, you can't have that love scene because we don't like it, or whatever. They're making decisions, arbitrary decisions from the studios, from a group of people who are telling you how to create your art. And it's like,
Well, now I'm talking in hindsight about all these things, and I'm a more mature and older person now than I was after Big Trouble. I thought that, for instance, like The Thing and Big Trouble were both really special, unique films and needed to be celebrated. This was my feeling about it, but they weren't quite so much. And I was pissed off. I was pissed off because of the American public wanted something different. And I guess I was just angry that my style of filmmaking from my generation has really started to change then. It was really evident all around. All around. The movie, you go to a movie and you see it, and it's like, oh, dear God, no. This is what it's become. There was one really successful movie with the studios, that was Starman. I made that after Christine. It was actually, in terms of a screenplay, it was very audience friendly. It was a sweet movie. It was a girl movie. It was a love story with some science fiction elements. I could kind of coast through it in terms of worrying about special effects because they weren't that important. That worked out pretty well. It got Jeff Bridges an Academy Award nomination. In that sense, I was Hollywood's golden boy for about 14 minutes. And I felt really good. Well, I've been able to do one of these studio films. But then I added my own quirky touch to Big Trouble in Little China, which I got very passionate about. And, audiences said, what is this?
It's a hard thing because when you grow up in the American system, some part of you is taught from such an early age that that's what success is, and that until you are Steven Spielberg, you haven't really made it. And even if your wisdom is that isn't the truth, there's that little kid inside, you know? I mean, I know I feel it in my own career, and I think most actors, directors, writers, whatever, talk to them, and they talk about that tear. And then you make choices about how to fit it, but, you know, there's part of you that looks at, you know, the glitz and the Oscars and goes, this is nonsense, and it's stupid, and this isn't a competitive sport, and this isn't a, you know, and, you know, who cares if I make $5 million? I just want to make enough to eat and do work that I love.
So I wanted to go someplace where I could make a film of my own, without interference, and I wouldn't be costing anybody any money. Because one of the things about making a big film is that you want to be responsible. It's my job. I'm supposed to be responsible to the studio if they hire me. They're gracious enough to hire me. Try to make them some money. And it's easier when you have a lower budget. It's easier because you don't have to make that much money to be profitable. So along came Prince of Darkness.
Prince des Ténèbres des années 80 pour Carpenter, ce que Assaut était aux années 70. Un premier film, mais avec un espèce de sérieux qu'il n'y avait quand même pas dans Assaut dans ses précédents films. Là, il va tourner Prince des Ténèbres et The Live, qui sont les deux coups de gueule en fait de Carpenter, des films extrêmement simples, épurés. Là, il revient vraiment, on est loin de Jack Burton, même de The Thing, c'est des films beaucoup plus modestes dans la structure, dans les budgets, etc., etc. Mais où Carpenter revient, mais au cœur de ce qu'il sait faire, c'est la mise en scène.
Welcome to the theater. For everyone's enjoyment, we'd like to remind you of the following rules. No talking. No smoking. No littering. No red meat. No freedom of religion. And remember, all marriages must be approved by the Department of Health. Failure to obey these rules will result in immediate loss of citizenship and deportation to the island of Los Angeles. Enjoy the show.
Your rules are really beginning to annoy me.
We ran a psycho profile on him using a database of 5 million sociopathic personalities. He hit the bottom of the curve.
Catches on quick, doesn't she?
This town loves a winner.
Say we play a little Bangkok rules. Nobody draws until this hits the ground. You ready?
Il y a des rumeurs qui circulent à ce moment-là sur l'état de santé de Carpenter. Et je suis convaincu, et peut-être que je me trompe, que lorsque Carpenter le fait, il pense lui aussi que c'est son dernier film. Lorsque Snake Plissken revient de l'île de Los Angeles, atterrit avec son hélicoptère et produit son hologramme, il y a une lassitude qu'on sent physiquement chez Kurt Russell à la fin. Hein, la lassitude, c'est aussi la dernière fois que je vous sauve, en gros, mais je reviendrai plus. Et Carpenter disant à ce moment-là, c'est la dernière fois que je fais un film, je suis fatigué. D'abord, je suis fatigué physiquement, je suis aussi fatigué de lutter contre les studios. Hein, donc voilà, après je ferai plus de films. D'abord parce que je peux pas et peut-être aussi parce que j'en ai plus envie. Et le regard caméra de Snake Plissken, qui est un cas unique dans la filmographie Carpenter, pour moi c'est ça. C'est le signe du dernier plan d'un cinéaste. Hein, Welcome to the Human Race, voix off. Hein, c'est voilà, c'est l'écran noir, blackout. Bienvenue à d'autres. Moi c'est fini.
I feel that my generation of filmmakers completely fucked it up. We fucked everything up. And I don't put myself in the category of Scorsese or Coppola. I mean, those guys have made $100 million movies. I never have. I'm just an old horror director. You know, I'm just hanging around with a fright mask and a knife and some fake blood. So I don't think you could put me in that category. By we, I mean the filmmakers from our generation sold out a lot, and I am absolutely right along with them. But I needed a job, and there's nothing wrong with that. I took jobs. I think I told you about Christine after The Thing. You know, my career wasn't doing too well, so I needed a job, and it came along, and I took it. Now, that may be selling out. Sure it is. And I'm happily doing it. I'm a happy capitalist horror.
Je pense que depuis Escape from LA, de toute façon, Carpenter s'est jamais vraiment remis. Je pense que dans sa carrière, en tout cas depuis Escape from LA, donc je crois pas à sa renaissance. Je crois pas que Vampire et Ghost of Mars soient des films qui montreraient un départ comme si Escape from LA n'avait pas eu lieu. Hein, je pense que là, sa filmographie marque, mais véritablement le pas à partir d'Escape.
Mais je pense toujours à la phrase de Chabrol, qui a eu cette phrase géniale sur Fritz Lang. Il disait Fritz Lang, il y a un moment où ses films ont commencé à faire la gueule. Et Carpenter, les 2 derniers films, ils font la gueule un peu. On a toujours un sentiment de tristesse quand on pense à Carpenter. Et on a un sentiment de tristesse parce que je crois que pour beaucoup de gens de ma génération, on a le sentiment d'avoir vécu vraiment en direct quelque chose qui appartenait un peu à la légende du cinéma. C'est-à-dire quand on lisait dans les histoires du cinéma qu'Orson Welles avait été bafoué, que Hitchcock avait connu un déclin terrible, que Fritz Lang, on l'empêchait de tourner en rond et qu'on l'a même empêché de faire les films qu'il voulait, etc. Pour nous, ça appartenait à l'histoire du cinéma, quoi. C'était aussi un peu, ça faisait un peu partie des mythes et légendes du cinéma, quoi. Le truc avec Carpenter, c'est qu'on a vu en direct comment le cinéma lui a tourné le dos, quoi. Comment finalement cet homme qui est un des plus grands cinéastes, vraiment, moi je le dis sans aucune hésitation, comment le cinéma lui a tourné le dos. À quel point le cinéma a été cruel et grossier avec lui, quoi. C'est que je pense que ces films vont rester beaucoup plus que pas mal de trucs qu'on voit aujourd'hui et qu'on élève au pinacle, un peu sans réfléchir, quoi.
I would change nothing about my career. Not that I could, but I would change nothing about it. Now, I'm delighted with the movies I've made. A couple of them that they're not my favorites, but I can watch them again and say, well, that's not bad. You know, fuck them if they don't like it.